The flames roared like a beast unchained, devouring the old fisherman's cottage on the edge of Finisterre's cliffs, and I charged in without a second thought, my rookie boots slipping on the rain-slicked stones. That's when I saw her, Delaney, that damn journalist with fire in her eyes brighter than the inferno itself, crouched in the doorway, scribbling notes on her battered pad as if the world weren't crumbling around her reckless head. "Get out!" I screamed over the crackle, grabbing her arm, but she yanked free with a glare that hit me harder than the heat, whispering, "Not until I get the truth," and in that instant I knew saving her would unravel everything I thought I understood about bravery, and about the wild ache she'd already carved into my chest. The salt air of western Spain clung to everything here in Finisterre, that jagged finger of land where the Atlantic battered the coast like an old grudge. I'd come from Seattle 6 months ago, chasing a fresh start after my parents' divorce turned our family home into a ghost story. At 25, Amaya Ruiz, daughter of a Mexican-American mom and a lapsed Irish dad, firefighting seemed like the perfect way to outrun the quiet that had swallowed me whole. The department in this sleepy Galician town was small, a mix of locals with accents thick as fog and a handful of expats like me, drawn by the cheap rent and the promise of reinvention. But nothing prepared me for the chaos Delaney Harper brought crashing into my life like a rogue wave. She was 28, American through and through, born in Boston, raised on stories of Woodward and Bernstein, with a freelance gig that had her chasing wildfires from California to the Iberian Peninsula. Delaney had arrived in Finisterre 3 weeks before that cottage fire, renting a cramped apartment above a tapas bar. Her walls papered with yellowed clippings of exposés on corporate greed and environmental cover-ups. She was all sharp edges and softer contradictions. Wild auburn curls that defied any brush, freckles like scattered constellations across her nose, and green eyes that could pin you in place or let you drown in their depths. I'd first spotted her at the weekly market, haggling over olives in broken Spanish, her laughter cutting through the vendors' chatter like sunlight through storm clouds. But it was the fire that fused us. That night, as sirens wailed and the sky turned orange, I'd suited up in my bunker gear, heart pounding with the raw terror every rookie feels on their third call. The cottage belonged to old Senor Vasco, a hermit who'd hoarded newspapers and grudges for decades. Rumors swirled that it was arson, tied to some shady land developers eyeing the coast for luxury villas, but Delaney had been the one poking the hornet's nest. She'd interviewed Vasco days earlier, her article in a local expat rag hinting at bribes and broken promises. Now, as I dragged her coughing form onto the gravel path, away from the collapsing roof, she shoved me off with surprising strength. "I'm fine, hero," she gasped, wiping soot from her cheek, her voice laced with that Boston edge, half defiance, half gratitude. "What the hell were you thinking, running in like that?" "Me? You're the one playing matador with a bull made of gasoline." I shot back, my helmet askew, adrenaline making my hands shake as I checked her for burns. Our eyes locked then, and something electric hummed between us, sharper than the sea wind whipping off the Atlantic. She held my gaze a beat too long, her lips parting as if to say more, but the arriving crew shattered the moment, shouts in Galician, the hiss of hoses dousing embers. By dawn, the fire was out, Vasco safe in the hospital with smoke inhalation but no worse, and Delaney had vanished into the night, leaving me with a business card tucked into my glove. Delaney Harper. Truth doesn't burn. I stared at it over coffee in the station's cramped kitchen, the card's edges fraying like my nerves. Why did she get under my skin like that? I'd dated guys back home, safe, predictable types who fixed cars or coded apps, but none had ever made my pulse stutter like her reckless fire. 2 days later, she cornered me outside the station, leaning against her rented Fiat with arms crossed, that notebook dangling from one hand like a challenge. Amaya Ruiz, right? The Seattle import who saves journalists from themselves. Her smile was crooked, teasing, but her eyes held a hunger, for the story or maybe something else. I felt exposed, my uniform suddenly too tight. "Just doing my job," I muttered, wiping engine grease from my hands. "You make it hard, though. Chasing leads into burning buildings? That's not journalism, that's suicide." She laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a gale. "And firefighting's not heroism, it's addiction. We both run toward the blaze, don't we?" She stepped closer, close enough that I caught her scent. Salt and ink and something faintly floral. "Buy me a coffee? I owe you for the rescue. And I might have questions about that fire." Against my better judgment, I said yes. We ended up at Café Delphine, a hole in the wall with mismatched chairs and espresso strong enough to wake the dead. Over cortados she grilled me, not about the blaze but about me. Why Spain? Why fire? I spilled it all. The divorce that left me adrift, the way flames felt like control when everything else burned down. She listened, really listened, her pen idle for once, green eyes softening as she traced the rim of her cup. Your turn, I said, emboldened by the caffeine. What's a hotshot reporter doing in a town that time forgot? Same as you, running from ghosts. Her voice dipped, vulnerability flickering like a match in the breeze. Last year I broke a story on a pharma scandal back home. Cost me my editor, my fiancé. Everything. Spain's supposed to be a reset. But this land grab? Developers from Madrid, backed by American investors, pushing locals off cliffs literally. For condos with ocean views. Vasco's place was ground zero. I can't walk away. I nodded, admiring her fire even as it scared me. By the time we parted, the sun dipping low over the Rias, she'd extracted my number and a promise to keep an eye out for suspicious activity. As she drove off, auburn curls whipping in the open window, I touched my arm where she'd brushed it goodbye. A casual graze that lingered like a brand. The weeks blurred into a rhythm of shifts and stolen moments. I'd spot her at dawn jogs along the Camino paths, her ponytail bouncing as she interviewed fishermen about rising tides and vanishing livelihoods. She'd crash my off days, dragging me to hidden coves where bioluminescent waves glowed under moonlit skies, sharing tales of her Boston childhood. Rowdy Irish-Italian clan, summers at Cape Cod, the journalism prof who called her a hurricane in heels. In return, I'd show her the town's underbelly. The secret azatis for stargazing, the annual Festa de Noite with bonfires that tested my off-duty restraint. It was easy to fall, harder to admit it. The first time she kissed me, it was after a storm, literal and figurative. A nor'wester had flooded the harbor, stranding her Fiat on a back road. I pulled her out in the department's jeep, rain plastering us both, and when we finally stopped at my tiny flat overlooking the lighthouse, shivering and soaked, she turned to me in the doorway. You always show up, she murmured, her hand cupping my jaw, thumb tracing my scar from a training mishap. Then her lips were on mine, soft, urgent, tasting of rain and revelation. I pulled back breathless. Delaney, Shoo. Just this once. But it wasn't once. That night, tangled in my sheets with the storm raging outside, we mapped each other with whispers and touches that felt like coming home. Not frantic, not conquest. Just two souls recognizing their match in the dark. She traced the tattoos on my shoulders, roses for my mom, waves for the losses, and I buried my face in her curls, inhaling the woman who'd turned my world to embers. But paradise in Finisterre was fragile as sea glass. Delaney's digging deepened. She uncovered emails linking the developers to local officials, whispers of threats against holdouts like Vasco. I warned her to ease off. The department had its own pressures, budget cuts from higher-ups who turned blind eyes to progress. You're playing with fire, I'd say, echoing our first meeting. And you're the only one who can put it out, she'd reply, kissing my fears away. Yet doubt crept in like fog off the Atlantic. Late nights she'd vanish for sources, returning with shadows under her eyes and vague excuses. Once I found a man's tie in her bag, silk, expensive, not mine. A interview prop. She laughed it off, but the seed planted. The betrayal hit like a backdraft on All Saints' Day. I just wrapped a shift containing a brush fire near the Pilgrim Trails when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Ask your girl about Javier Ruiz. He's not just a source. Javier Ruiz. My uncle, the one who'd emigrated here decades ago, now a mid-level bureaucrat in the town hall. Heart slamming, I raced to her apartment, the Fiat parked crookedly outside. She opened the door in a towel, fresh from a shower, surprise melting into guilt as I shoved the printout in her face. Screenshots from an anonymous drop, emails between her and Javier. Cozy dinners. Shared research. A photo of them at a seaside cafe. Heads bent close, her hand on his arm. Amaya, it's not. What? Not what it looks like. My voice cracked, the room spinning. You said you were done with men. With games. But this? Using my own family to chase your scoop. Tears streaked her face, but she didn't reach for me. Javier's key to the story. The developers bribed him for permits. I needed proof and he offered. It was never more than that. I swear. Liar. The word tasted like ash. I stormed out into the chill night, the town's lanterns mocking me with their steady glow. How could I have been so blind? The rookie who ran into flames, only to get burned by the one person who'd made me feel seen. Days bled into silence. I threw myself into work. Drills at dawn, community demos for school kids. Anything to drown the hollow ache. Finisterre whispered with autumn's chill. Pilgrims thinned on the paths, leaves turning gold like false promises. Delaney tried. Notes slipped under my door, voicemails raw with pleas. I messed up. Let me explain. I love you, Amaya. God, I love you. But love? Felt like another story she'd spun. Vasco's recovery brought a fragile truce. He invited us both to his rebuilt cottage, timbers fresh-scented, windows framing the endless sea. The fire took my past, he said in halting English, pressing glasses of Origo into our hands. But it gave you two a spark. Don't let fools in suits snuff it. Delaney sat across from me, her curls tamed for once, eyes pleading. Later, as stars pricked the velvet sky, she found me on the porch. He was my way in, not my way out, she whispered, voice breaking. Javier's married, twice my age. It was leverage, nothing else. I pushed too hard like always. But you? You're the truth I can't write away. I wanted to hate her, but the pull was tidal. You broke me, Delaney. How do I trust the woman who runs toward danger? Even when it's me. She knelt then, taking my hands, her freckles pale in the moonlight. By letting me prove it. The story's almost done. Help me finish it. For Vasco. For us. Against every instinct I nodded. We pooled our worlds. My uncle's reluctant confession, pressured by debts, not malice, and her encrypted files exposing the syndicate. But the developers caught wind. A warning came swift. A slashed tire on her Fiat. Anonymous calls laced with threats. Back off or the next fire's yours. The climax brewed on a moonless night. Winds howling like banshees off the Costa de Mort. Delaney had a meet with a whistleblower, a former engineer, jittery and hooded, at the abandoned lighthouse ruins where waves gnashed like teeth below. Stay safe, I'd begged, kissing her fiercely in the station lot. No heroics. But heroism was her blood. My shift ended early. Instinct dragged me to the cliffs. I arrived to chaos, flashlights bobbing, shouts in Spanish echoing off stone. The engineer lay crumpled, not dead but dazed, mumbling of a setup. And Delaney, pinned against the lighthouse wall by two suited thugs, her notebook trampled in the surf, face bruised but defiant. Let her go. I roared, lunging from shadows, my off-duty knife flashing in the dim. Adrenaline surged, a blur of fists and grapples, me tackling one, her kneeing the other square. We fought like we'd been forged for it. Backs to the wall, sea spray mingling with sweat. A siren wailed distant, backup, alerted by the engineer's SOS. But it was her hand finding mine mid-scuffle that anchored me. Amaya! Together, I gasped, and we surged as one, driving them back until they fled into the night, tires screeching on the coastal road. Panting, collapsing against each other as Guardia Civil lights flooded the scene. She buried her face in my neck. I thought I'd lost you. You almost did. But as we gave statements, her arm linked fierce through mine, the fracture mended. Not seamless but strong in its scars. The exposé dropped a week later, front page in El País and picked up by The Guardian. Cliffhanger corruption. How greed threatened Spain's wild west coast. Arrests followed, developers in cuffs, Javier confessing tearfully over family dinner. Absolved in my eyes if not the law's. Finisterre exhaled. Locals toasted with queimada, flames dancing harmless in iron pots. For us the real fire tempered slow. Winters came gentle with shared shifts. Me teaching her knots for climbing gear, her reading me Hemingway by the hearth. Betrayal's shadow lingered, but we faced it in therapy sessions via Zoom with a Seattle counselor, unpacking our runs from pain. Love isn't a story, she'd say, tracing my palm one rainy eve. It's the rewrite. I believed her finally. On New Year's, as fireworks bloomed over the Rias, reds and golds mirroring our chaos, we stood on my balcony, her head on my shoulder. To rookies and hurricanes, I toasted with cava. To the blaze we build together. she replied, and kissed me under the stars, the Atlantic murmuring approval below. In Finisterre, where land meets endless sea, we'd found our shore. Not perfect, but ours. Human, flawed, enduring. And in that, the deepest romance of all. Spring unfurled along the Galician coast like a hesitant promise, wild camellias blooming defiant against the salt winds, mirroring the fragile bloom in our mended hearts. Delaney and I had settled into a rhythm that felt less like survival and more like grace. Mornings tangled in her sheets, the scent of fresh bread wafting from the bakery below. Afternoons where I'd haul hoses at the station while she typed furiously in cafes, chasing leads on sustainable fishing initiatives to balance her exposé's scars. At 25, I was no longer the wide-eyed rookie. The department chief had pinned a commendation on my jacket for that lighthouse brawl, dubbing me the Cliff Guardian with a gruff pat on the back. But it was Delaney's quiet pride, her green eyes sparkling over candlelit paella, that made the badge sit lighter. Yet peace in paradise was a siren's song. Whispers slithered through Finisterre's narrow streets. The developer's trial loomed in A Coruña, a spectacle of suits and subpoenas that dredged up old ghosts. Javier, my uncle, bloodied by his own choices, faced charges as a minor player, his wife leaving him in a flurry of packed bags and slammed doors. Family dinners turned tense. My aunt's eyes, once warm as Abuela's hugs, now darted accusatory at me, as if I'd lit the match. "You brought that American storm into our home," she'd hiss in Spanish, while Mom, visiting from Seattle via video call, urged patience from across the ocean. Delaney felt it too, the backlash's undercurrent. Hate mail arrived in her P.O. box, typed screeds from concerned citizens calling her a Yankee vulture, picking at local bones. One evening, as we walked the pilgrim shell-strewn paths, she stopped abruptly, her curls catching the dying light. "Amaya, what if I leave? After the trial? Go back to Boston, rebuild there. You could come. Start fresh in a city that doesn't remember my mistakes." Her words landed like driftwood on my chest. Heavy, unexpected. Leave? This is home now. For both of us. I pulled her close, but doubt gnawed. Was I anchoring her? Or was she the weight dragging me under? That night, as rain pattered our tin roof, she traced lazy circles on my stomach, her voice a murmur against my skin. "I dream of us in a brownstone, you fighting fires in the FDNY, me at the Globe. No cliffs, no corruption, just us." It sounded idyllic, but Finisterre's wildness had woven into my veins, the crash of waves like a lullaby, the camaraderie of crew barbecues with grilled sardines and fado-tinged guitars. "Dreams change," I whispered, kissing her temple. "But this? Feels real." The trial began in May. A circus under A Coruña's gray skies. We drove up together, her Fiat groaning up the winding N6, my hand on her knee for the curves. The courthouse loomed like a concrete sentinel, protesters clashing outside, locals waving placards for Justicia Costera, countered by suited backers in Desarrollo Económico banners. Inside, the air hummed with fluorescent buzz and murmured Galician. Delaney testified first, her voice steady as she laid out the paper trail. Falsified environmental reports, kickbacks funneled through offshore accounts. The lead developer, a slick Madridite named Señor Ortega, glared from the dock, his eyes like polished obsidian. I watched from the gallery, heart swelling with a fierce protectiveness. She was magnificent, poised, unflinching, her freckles standing out against flushed cheeks. But when Javier took the stand, crumbling under cross-examination, admitting his role with sobs that echoed off marble walls, something in me fractured anew. Family first, he'd always preached. Yet here he was, unraveling for greed's ghost. Delaney's face drained, her fork clattering against ceramic. I stood, voice low and steel. "Back off. That's my family you're slandering." The reporter smirked, retreating, but the damage seeped. Headlines the next day twisted her heroism into seductive scoop. Journalists' tactics questioned. She withdrew then, holing up in her apartment, blinds drawn against the town's prying eyes. I'd bring meals, empanadas from the market, her favorite, but she'd pick at them, eyes distant. "What if they're right?" she'd whisper one night, curled against me on her lumpy couch. "I used people. Javier. Even you at first, seeing the firefighter in you as my perfect angle." I cupped her face, thumbs brushing away tears. "You woke me up. That's not use, that's love." But the words felt thin against the growing rift. My shift stretched longer, excuses to avoid the tension. Hers dissolved into freelance pitches that went unanswered. Friends noticed. Luz, the station dispatcher with her infectious laugh, pulled me aside after a drill. Nina, you're glowing less. Fix it before the spark dies. The breaking point came mid-June. Heat shimmering off the Rias like a fever dream. A call crackled over the radio. Wildfire in the eucalyptus groves near Muxia, sparked by a downed power line amid drought winds. The crew mobilized, me in the lead truck, heart racing with that familiar thrill-terror. As we raced the coastal road, flames licking hillsides like voracious tongues, my phone vibrated. Delaney? Be safe. I love you. We need to talk. But the blaze was a monster, devouring dry scrub and threatening hillside villages. We battled for hours, hoses snaking through smoke, chainsaws felling fuel lines, my muscles screaming, lungs burning under the mask. Dusk fell blood-red when a gust shifted, trapping 2 crewmates in a gully. Ruiz, go. Chief barked and I rappelled down, rope-biting palms emerging with them singed but whole. Exhaustion hit like a wall as we mopped up, stars wheeling overhead. That's when I saw her jeep parked at the access road, headlights cutting the haze. Delaney, silhouetted against the glow, ran to me, enveloping me in a hug that smelled of worry and wildflowers. I heard on the scanner, God, Amaya. I'm okay. But as she pulled back, her eyes held that storm cloud weight. What is it? The talk. She glanced at the smoldering earth, then at me. A job offer. From the Times. Covering climate refugees in the Mediterranean. Big podcast books. But it means leaving. Now. The words hollowed me. And us. I don't know. Honesty raw as exposed roots. This place. It's poisoned us. The trial, the rumors. I love you but I can't breathe here. Panic clawed. Abandonment echoing my parents' split. The empty house in Seattle. So run again? That's your fix? Drag me into your hurricane. Then bolt when the eye passes. Her face crumpled. It's not. It is. I turned away, boots crunching ash. Go. But don't ask me to follow. She left at dawn, taillights fading into mist-shrouded roads. Finisterre felt vast, empty. Waves mocking with their endless return. Summer dragged, a blur of solitary jogs and overtime. The trial wrapped with convictions. Ortega to prison. Restitution for displaced families. But victory tasted bitter without her to share it. Vasco sent a card. Fires rage but embers warm. Find your heat. Mom called, her voice crackling over the line. Mija, love's not a station. It's the call you answer. I resisted, building walls higher than the cliffs. Until autumn's equinox, when a nor'easter lashed the coast, flooding the harbor and stranding fishing boats. The department called all hands. I worked through the gale, winching hulls from roiling waters soaked to the bone. At midnight, as lightning forked the sky, a familiar figure appeared at the dock. Delaney, drenched, curls plastered, holding a sodden envelope. You're back. My voice cracked over the thunder. Couldn't stay away. She thrust the envelope. A withdrawal letter from the Times, ink running like tears. I turned it down. Climates change, but this? She gestured to the storm-lashed sea to me. This is my story. If you'll have me. Lightning illuminated her face. Vulnerable, fierce home. I pulled her into the rain, our kiss salt-stung and desperate. The world narrowing to her heartbeat against mine. But reconciliation demanded excavation. We talked endless, aching nights over herbal teas and star maps, unearthing fears. Her abandonment issues from a father's early death. My terror of being the fix-it kid in a broken home. Therapy resumed, in person now with a counselor in Santiago de Compostela. Sessions where we held hands through the hard truths. Betrayal isn't the end, the therapist said, her voice calm as a pilgrim's staff. It's the forge. And so we forged. Delaney pivoted her work. Podcasts on coastal resilience. Partnering with locals like Vasco to amplify voices, not exploit them. I mentored rookies, sharing tales of cliffs and courage, my scar a badge of shared survival. Winter solstice brought the turning. We hiked to Cape Finisterre's end, where Celts once burned the old year. The stone kiln cold now but potent with memory. Delaney carried a lantern. I a bundle of letters. Unsent words from our rift, now fuel for ritual. As flames caught, we read aloud. Regrets, rages, redemptions. The fire purified, smoke curling heavenward like prayers. I choose you, she said, ashes scattering on wind. Every day. And I you, I echoed, pulling her close. The Atlantic stretched infinite, but in her arms I was found. The new year dawned crisp and clarifying. Finisterre's wreaths glittering like veins of quartz under a reluctant sun. Delaney and I had leased a cottage on the outskirts. A stone and stucco haven with a widow's walk for stargazing, its hearth wide enough for two. Mornings began with her humming Joan Baez tunes as she brewed café con leche, me lacing boots for patrols, our goodbye kisses lingering like fog on the glass. At 26 now, the rookie shell had cracked open. I moved with the quiet confidence of someone who'd stared down infernos, both literal and of the heart. Delaney, ever the whirlwind, channeled her energies into Voices of the Verge, a multimedia series profiling expats and locals rebuilding after the scandal, her byline a beacon of redemption rather than ruin. Yet scars like keloids thicken before they fade. Javier's sentencing in February tested us. A 3-year term suspended to community service, but the family fracture ran deep. My aunt shunned gatherings, her silence a colder gale than any Nor'wester. At Easter, Mom flew in, her Seattle pragmatism clashing with Galician fatalism over a tense lunch of calderada. Families bend, Mija, she said, squeezing my hand under the table. They don't always break. Delaney, sensing the storm, excused herself early, leaving me to navigate the emotional flotsam alone. That night, as waves gnawed the shore below our cottage, she found me on the widow's walk, knees to chest, staring at the black horizon. Talk to me, she urged, settling beside me, her warmth a bulwark against the chill. It's like the fire never fully went out, I admitted, voice raw. Javier's my blood, but what he did, it tainted us. And you were the messenger. She nodded, green eyes reflecting the lighthouse's pulse. I know. And I'll carry that guilt forever. But we're not defined by the blaze. We're the ones who rebuild. Her hand slipped into mine, steady as anchor chain. We stayed there till dawn, whispering blueprints for healing. Weekly calls to Javier, letters to my aunt laced with forgiveness, not demands. Spring's thaw mirrored our own. Delaney's series gained traction. A TEDx invite from Lisbon, features in the Atlantic that framed Finisterre not as victim, but vanguard. I joined her on shoots hauling gear up cliff paths, my firefighters eye-catching details she missed. The resilience in a fisherman's calloused hands, the poetry in a widow's mended nets. One afternoon interviewing a young activist named Sophia. Tattooed and fierce, leading youth cleanups, we paused at a cove where seals basked on rocks. Sophia grinned, tossing us wetsuits. Swim with them. Feel the wild. We dove in, the sea cool and forgiving, bioluminescent trails sparking behind our kicks. Surfacing, sputtering, Delaney splashed me, laughter bubbling free. This, she gasped, treading water. This is why I stayed. Later, drying on sun-warmed stones, Sophia eyed us with knowing mischief. You too like the coast itself. Rough edges but unbreakable. Her words lingered, a benediction. But drama, that uninvited guest, knocked again in July's swelter. A heat wave parched the land, birthing spot fires in the pine barrens. Small but insidious, testing our complacency. During one, a Category 2 blaze near sea, I led a mop-up crew, axe in hand, when a cry pierced the haze. Ayuda! Help! A hiker, elderly, twisted ankle in the underbrush. As I splinted her leg, radioing evac, a shadow loomed. Ortega's son, released on technicality, lurking with a camera phone. Ruiz, he sneered. Still playing savior? Daddy says hello. Rage flared hotter than embers. I lunged, but the chief's voice crackled. Stand down, Ruiz. Later at the station, fists clenched, I confessed to Delaney over lukewarm beer. He thinks he owns the fear he sowed. She paced, curls wild. Then we starve it. My next piece on post-trial harassment. Your voice, the cruise. Make it public. We did. Her article, Ashes of Justice. Lingering threats on Spain's coast. Hit like a squall, interviews with victims, data on intimidation spikes, my byline as co-author, raw recount of the encounter. Backlash roared. Online trolls dubbing us lesbian crusaders. A brick through our cottage window one midnight, shattering glass like brittle trust. We boarded it up at dawn, hands steady. her head on my shoulder as we swept shards. "They're afraid," she murmured. "Good." The climax crested in August, festival season's fever. The Festa du Mar in Muscia drew crowds, bonfires on beaches, bagpipes wailing Celtic laments, the sea a silver sheet under full moon. Delaney and I wandered hand in threaded, her in a sundress swirling like flames, me in linen shirt rolled to elbows. Amid the revelry, Sophia pulled us into a circle dance, feet stomping to drums, laughter loosening knots we'd carried since winter. But joy fractured when Javier appeared. Unannounced, gaunt in a ill-fitting suit, clutching a bouquet of camellias. "Amaya! Delaney! I had to see you." His eyes, once twinkling, were hollowed by regret. The crowd swirled oblivious. We stepped aside to a quieter dune, waves hissing secrets. "You shouldn't be here," I said, voice tight. "Not after." "I know." He thrust the flowers at Delaney. "For you. For the truth you chased when I couldn't." Tears tracked his weathered cheeks. Prison was a cage, but this losing you is the sentence. Delaney took the blooms, her touch gentle. "It's not lost, Javier. It's remade." She glanced at me, a question in her gaze. Forgiveness welled unbidden. A tide I couldn't dam. "Come to the cottage tomorrow," I said. "We'll talk. Really talk." He nodded, vanishing into the throng like a pilgrim absolved. That night, as fireworks arced over the bay, bursts of crimson and gold, Delaney and I made love on the dune's edge, bodies attuned to the sea's cadence, her whispers a litany of us. "Yours. Always." Autumn wove closure. Javier's visit sparked a family thaw, letters exchanged. A cautious lunch where my aunt's ice cracked over shared tortilla. Mom extended her stay, baking bizcocho in our kitchen, her stories bridging continents. Delaney's series wrapped with a live event at the lighthouse. Standing room only, voices rising in harmony against erasure. As leaves turned amber, we hiked the Finisterre Trail one last time for the season. Packs light with cider and cheese. At the cape where earth yields to ocean, Delaney knelt, pulling a small box from her jacket. Not ring but a scallop shell engraved. "Our compass." "Not a proposal," she said, eyes shimmering. "A promise. To navigate together, storms and all." I traced the etching, heart full. "Yes. To every horizon." Winter returned gentle, hearts crackling with tales. Vasco hosted a solstice feast, his cottage aglow with lanterns, locals toasting to the women who tamed the wild. Javier joined, tentative, his service hours now aiding community gardens. We danced, clumsy, joyful, Delaney's curls brushing my cheek, her laughter my North Star. In Finisterre's embrace, we'd learned love's true drama. Not the blaze's roar, but the quiet rebuild, the humanistic grace of choosing daily the flawed beautiful other. Happy. Not fairy tale but profoundly so, rooted deep as cliffside pines, resilient as the tide's return. And as the Atlantic whispered eternal, I knew. This was our story, unfinished, ever burning.